And the other thing that people need to understand too, that they didn't get into in that episode, is that when you are working with a buyer, there's two documents that you can have signed, or you can have none signed, just depends on how you do business. But, if you have a buyer representation agreement signed, then by law, through that agreement, like, you have a duty to that person to represent them to the fairest, like, fairly, and, be true to them. If you have a customer service agreement, all you do is guide them through the process and basically do whatever they tell you to do. If you have nothing signed, then there's nothing from stopping you from steering, like they said in the episode, right? Now, me as a person, ethically, I wouldn't, whether I have anything signed, I wouldn't steer anyone away from anyone, because going into the situation, I would, be treating that person fairly. And if it was my listing, I would probably pass them off to another agent, because I don't believe in working both sides, which I know a lot of agents still do. So you really got to think about it. Like, do I think what those agents were doing in the episode was right? No, but it could be that they operate under the rule of, if I don't have an agreement signed with anyone, then I'm just going to do whatever I feel is right for me at the time, So
I know a lot of agents will essentially make clients sign that document on the first visit, like, kind of like, here, we're working together, sign this paper. I'm not basically going to have a further conversation with you. And then others will go much further along in the process, and prior to submitting an offer, say, okay, well, we're going to put some pen to paper and agree to work together. So you're basically saying, just to make it crystal clear for everyone listening, if someone doesn't have that agent agreement signed, then legally the agent could technically steer them without any repercussions. I'm not saying that's ethically correct, but you're saying, given the rules, if they don't have an agreement signed, they can do that.
Because, like, those agents, in some respects, it's like, if anyone just called, like, if those people just called that agent and the agent said, sure, I'll take you out to see the house. No matter what the agent does, there's not really much that can happen other than them looking bad and making the brokerage look bad. But legally, if there's nothing signed, and I mean, we don't know, they don't talk about that, right?
Right.
So what does that look like? So that's another thing that I think was kind of left out and magically forgotten about, just to make the scenario look as bad as it possibly could. And the other thing was, that woman listed her house. Marketplace did suggest that they made some calls, and the agents said that the home was overpriced. Maybe it was. I didn't, I reached out to someone in Toronto asking about that property in particular, but I didn't hear back. And, well, I'm sure I'll get to that at some point. But the other comment was, it's Toronto, it was spring. It's like, that house could have been overpriced. And then when it did sell in 3 months, it could have been worth. Yeah.
You mentioned in the last episode, I thought that was a very accurate, understanding of the market, right? In 3 months, I mean, the property could have easily gone up 150 to 200 grand, just given where the market was in the spring. And that seems very plausible. For yourself, Greg, like, if you have a new client that's calling you like that, if someone called you out of the blue and said, I want to go look at 123 Main Street, what kind of questions are you asking them to vet? Like, are you working with someone else right now? Have you been to any other properties with any other agents? Because, for them to call 3 different agents who are willing to show them properties, like you said, without any real relationship built, that's probably going to be a special type, or like a specific type of agent, correct? That would do that without any kind of due diligence?
What I do is, when I send out an email, like, if it's an email, if I get an email asking about a property, they want to see it. A lot of the times, I'm pretty lucky. A lot of my business is past client referral base, but if I get somebody who I saw your listing, or I got your name, I found you online, are you able to help? Then if that's what it is, I'm like, are you pre-approved for a mortgage? Are you currently under contract with another realtor? Have you bought and sold real estate in the past? Are you renting, or are you renting a house? As sometimes I might add in something like, are you familiar with the buyer representation agreement? And they just answer those questions. And based on that, I have a follow-up, and then just decide, how I want to approach it. And, when you speak with someone, I think when you've been doing it as long as we have, when you get on that call, you kind of have a sense of where they're going. and how they're going to be, and whether you think you're going to get along with them or not. And I said it before too. It's like, I said, we'll meet up, and I'll be glad to show you the house. Thanks for answering those questions. If we feel that we're a good fit after that and you want to move forward and work together, we'll talk about that then. Mm-hmm. That's it.
We will sometimes run into that as well. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think our sound's second off, so we're a bit laggy.
So too.
I was going to say that we oftentimes, I shouldn't say oftentimes, but we do run into that time to time in our industry as well, where, someone may have talked to another broker or their bank or whoever. So, we've kind of gotten into the habit, and we tell our agents as well to always ask, where are you at in the process? Like, are you working with someone? Have you spoken to your bank? Have you been pre-approved previously? Because it helps you understand where their head is at and what their expectations are from the get-go. And oftentimes people will say, no, I haven't worked with anyone else. And then we'll do a credit check and see that they got a credit pull from, ABC brokerage a month ago. And then I can go back and say, hey, Greg, I know you mentioned that you hadn't spoken to anyone, but we do see that there was a credit check about a month ago. Just wanted to see where things stand with that relationship. And they'd be like, oh no, that was just a one-off. We talked to someone or whatever. But it's important to understand where people are at in the process and who they have already spoken to, so that you can, as a realtor or as a mortgage broker, properly advise them on next steps and even some of the risks that are involved in that. Like for us as a broker, if someone's working with 2 or 3 other brokers and we're all working, we all work with pretty much the same banks, right? Some of us have different relationships with those lenders, depending on the size of your brokerage, how much volume you're doing, et cetera. So oftentimes, we might have, I'm just using any example. I'll use TD as an example. We might have a relationship with TD where we get, a rate that's 0.05 lower than, say, another brokerage. So if someone is dealing with me and another broker and they find a property that they like, and we both decide, you know what, and I don't know this person's working with another broker. Let's just say they're doing this behind my back for whatever reason. I mean, there's no advantage to do that, but let's just say they are. If we both try to submit the file to TD, one of us is going to get blocked, because banks will only accept an application from one, like they'll only accept one application per client. You can't have, 3 different brokers submitting to the same bank. So what has happened in the past is that someone will be working with a broker previously, that person submitted somewhere, and then they come to us. And they say, I no longer want to work with this broker. And that might be the best lender. So when we try to submit there now, we can't, because the other broker has already submitted there. And hypothetically speaking, if that broker doesn't have as strong of a relationship, well, now they're getting a higher rate and maybe a lesser product because they're dealing with that broker instead of us. So it's really important to understand, like, who are you working with? And do we have like a mutually exclusive relationship? Because I can only best advise you if we're working one-on-one. Like if you're working with 5 other people, it just makes everyone's job harder. You have to provide 5 times the paperwork, 5 times the discussions. Like it doesn't benefit anyone in the process. So I have to imagine that's the same on your side.
Yeah. And, I find people are pretty straight up. If they have been working with someone, they'll say like they'll tell me, yeah, we have been, but that relationship isn't going anywhere. And no, we didn't sign anything. And it's like, okay. And sometimes if there has been times where I felt kind of uneasy about certain things, and I'll actually call that agent if they do mention that they were working with someone, and I'll say, look, I've been talking to these people. They mentioned your name. I just want to know where you guys sit. Do you want to follow up with them? I'll never just take somebody when they actually tell me that they've been previously working with somebody, because I want to know the whole story. I don't want to become that other agent where now they're calling somebody else again, right?
Yes. I actually had an instance recently where someone had met me through a first-time homebuyer webinar that I had done. And when I ended up having a conversation with them, they told me that they had been pre-approved with another broker and this and that. And I asked who the broker was, and I actually knew the person personally. And so I told the client, I said, listen, I said, they're an excellent advisor. I said, I would strongly recommend you, double back with them and ask them these questions, because, they'll know the answer and they'll be able to properly advise you. And then I messaged the agent as well and just said, hey, I was speaking with Greg Campbell today. They mentioned they had been already working with you. I basically redirected them to you. And I think like for our industry, it's really important to respect other people's advice as well and not step on toes. The big difference in our industry is that we don't have that same agent agreement, right? So really clients, as much as I hate to say this, like they don't really have any at least like legal responsibility to work with us. We could advise them all the way. And this happens. I mean, a couple times I've advised clients for 1.5 years on new builds and construction, so on. And last minute they end up going to the bank 2 weeks before closing. And, that's the sort of stuff that does happen, but ideally you don't want to be the person that is, stealing a client or talking bad about another agent behind their back. It just doesn't benefit anyone. It doesn't benefit the industry. But one thing we do see in our side of things, I think there's been a few agents that have maybe been burned one too many times in that fashion. And they will actually have clients sign an agreement saying, if you do not work with me to fruition or till funding, you basically owe me $1,000 or $500, almost like a commitment fee. So that does happen. I'm not saying I necessarily am for it or against it. I don't do it. But everyone's got to make a living. So I guess it's your own experience, right?
Of course. And I mean, over here in Ontario, they've been trying to do this, I guess, for a while. They've been working on it. Apparently things take forever, but having the separate buyer broker and then the selling brokerage. And when you join a brokerage, you either become one or either agent.
So can I ask you a question, Greg?
Like
I know we talked about this probably about 1 year ago, but I think since we're on the topic, it's definitely worth mentioning. When it comes to agreements, can you explain if you are selling a home for a client and someone comes in and says, "Hey, Greg, I don't have a realtor. I'm considering buying this home." Explain how you, as a realtor, and I know you don't do this, but if a realtor were to take on both people, explain the difference between the duty they have to the seller and the duty they have to the buyer, because they are quite different.
Yeah, well, it depends, because if you have a representation agreement with the seller and a representation agreement with the buyer, then you can't do anything. Then you're setting yourself up for a disaster, because legally, according to the terms of the Ontario Real Estate Association and RECO, you basically can't say anything to either party.
Right.
So they can just tell you they can just tell you what they want to do, what they agree to, but you can't, imagine being in a situation where you're trying to, you're supposed to be advising, and then you're on both sides and you have to just sit there and be like, well, this is what they're offering. What would you like to do? Okay. What do you think? Sorry. Can't help you there. So in most circumstances, if you have a listing and someone comes in as a buyer, what you'll do is you'll sign the customer service agreement with the buyer, which means that you're going to do your best to help the process, but you can't give them any advice at all. So they just kind of say, and then now, of course, if that actually happens, you know what I mean? People nudge, wink, wink kind of stuff. And it happens. And I mean, and I've done it before. I don't do it anymore, but I've done it in the past. And in the situations that I did do it in, I just knew at the time because of the circumstances that if I didn't do it, this wasn't going to get done. So I took it upon myself. But now, and I know I've said this before too, if anyone comes on, I just pass them off to someone else to represent them on the purchase, which I think is fair, because then your seller understands that you're totally working for them. And you're not looking just to get it done and get more commission. At least, that's how I operate.
Yeah. And I know I said this last time we discussed this, which again was a while ago. So apologies to anyone who is, an avid listener and has heard this conversation before, but that is the issue, is that if you have a buyer and a seller, typically, they say a good negotiation is when both people leave unsatisfied, right? It's kind of like, damn it, we probably could have got a bit more.
Yeah.
And the buyer's like, damn it, I could have paid a bit less. But in the situation where the person in the middle has a direct benefit of selling the home, one of those two people, either the buyer or the seller, is going to come out on the short end, right? Like the real estate agent's always going to win.
Yeah.
And then either the buyer or the seller is going to win, which means that either the buyer or the seller is going to lose. There's no way that everyone can be happy, I don't think, in that situation.
No, and it's tough. Like there was 2 times this year where I actually had buyers that I took through my listing because it was exactly what they were looking for, but neither of those deals went through, and I was super thankful. But going into it, I told the buyer, I said, look, I've been working with you guys for a bit. We're going to go see my listing. If for whatever reason you guys want it, I'm going to have to refer you to somebody else to represent you. And I explained to them, I'm like, it's not what I want to do. I go, but in this scenario, I have a seller agreement for this property, and I have to put them before you, because that's because the selling product is one product, and a buyer can have multiple options, right? So in that scenario, if I'm working with a seller and a buyer, I would put my allegiance towards the seller first, and pass the buyer off to a colleague to fairly represent them. And, if they got it, great. And they agreed. They're like, absolutely, we understand, we trust you. And then if they got the house, great. And if not, then I'd go back out and look with them again. But again, it's conversation.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing that I should mention, and we've discussed this before as well, is that anytime there is a buy and sell where the same agent is representing both sides, and or both agents work in the same office, that automatically triggers an appraisal. So there's no way around that. Right. So if you are selling the property and this buying agent is also from Blue Panda, then it 100% will require an appraisal.